Alright, we got 5 movies today. We're getting close to the end of August, which usually is a complete dead zone as far as scheduled movies go. I was hoping we'd get Good Time, the Robert Pattinson movie, but we didn't. Wind River is about 30 minutes away from here, so I'm hoping to do that in the next week or two. But we didn't get that either here. They thought we needed Birth of the Dragon instead, or Leap instead. So obviously I settled on one of those, but actually I decided to go back a week first, because I had a free movie after that Annabelle fiasco. So we're actually going to start with The Hitman's Bodyguard. A movie that seemed like it had potential. Like, there was a time there when we got a little bit of Ryan Reynolds, Samuel L. Jackson chemistry when they were on the press tour for Turbo. So it seemed promising enough, but then of course we got that first poster, and it was the kind of the redone version of the Bodyguard poster with Ryan Reynolds standing in for Kevin Costner and Samuel L. Jackson standing in for Whitney Houston, and he's holding him. And then when you look at that poster and you think, that could be funny, but it also looks an awful lot like a one-joke idea. Sort of like, I was having flashbacks of The Man, remember, with Jackson and Eugene Levy from like 2005, and how much of a one-note disaster that was. And just a total and complete comedy cemetery. And I also had a little trouble going into this, because as you know how much I love Jackson so much, and I do tend to like Ryan Reynolds, but the problem is that pretty much living in this post-Deadpool world, I'm having a huge case of Ryan Reynolds fatigue. I kind of feel like he pretty much used up all of his charm in Deadpool, and now it really just feels like the same thing following it. And so, but then the two of them working together, maybe it'll be okay. Like I do like the idea for the most part, and this is when the movie works the most, obviously, is when Reynolds is playing it completely straight, and Jackson is the funny one, and the one just kind of laughing in the face of all the different scenarios, quite literally. And Reynolds doesn't have to, try to say a funny line or try to do that thing he does where it's like, where he has those lines throughout the movie where it's like, he talks about a car smelling like a cemetery, or he talks about Jackson being a coffin magnet, and it's like, he's doing that thing where he's trying to use his phrasing in that exact same delivery to score laughs, but it just feels like a dry well. So when he's not trying to be funny and he just has to be the straight man to whatever Jackson's doing, is when he inadvertently is much funnier. And so there is, like, and especially the stuff when they have overlapping dialogue, like when they're just yelling at each other, that's the kind of thing that you would think would grow tired pretty quickly. But I think it's actually when the movie's working the most. Because you do have, for starters, we didn't have a very clear introduction here. I feel like a lot of it's kind of like Suicide Squad. This movie feels like it's like 20 minutes of intro before we get anywhere. And because Reynolds' character gets not one but two intros. Like in any other circumstance, the opening scene with the guy he's supposed to be protecting getting shot would be an intro for a character, or the following scene, the Richard E. Grant scene. It's always nice to see Richard E. Grant pop up, but still, this particular scene following the other scene, it's to show, like you would think, obviously it's to show the transition of he used to have really, well-respected clients, and now his clients are like Richard E. Grant's character, the really coked-out lawyers or whatever. But even so, it didn't feel like his job had changed that much to the point that this warranted an extra intro, when we already pretty much knew where his character was coming from because of the opening scene. I think you could have chosen one of those scenes or the other, or maybe mentioned his, obviously it's important later, but the idea of the first client we see getting killed being something he talks about in flashback, because there's so many scenes in this movie where they talk in flashback, so that probably would have fit in about there, but they decided to just go with both. And then this weird thing where we're not even introduced to Jackson next, we're introduced to Gary Oldman next, who is our villain. And this movie really doesn't quite know how to use its Gary Oldman. Like, he's introduced in this big scene that plays him out like a big deal. He kills a kid in his opening scene, and then he gets like a big scene at the end. But other than that, he's just there. He stabs the dude in the hand too. But I mean, other than that, there's really not a whole lot he has to do except sit in total silence. Where there's actually a moment towards the end where obviously he spends the whole movie on trial, and the lawyer actually says, gesturing to Oldman, "Are you just here to waste my client's time?" Now I was like, are you talking to the movie's production and Gary Oldman's time? Because that makes sense. But then, yes, we're finally introduced to Jackson after all this. It feels like the movie's been on for 20 minutes already. And it almost kind of feels, he's already in prison. It almost kind of feels like we're picking up on his character at the very end of Out of Sight. It kind of feels like we're just seeing where that guy went. And I did like the idea of... I do kind of like the tie-in to where, number one, there is, obviously Reynolds is going to have a love story, because this movie needs to drag out. But I like the way they managed to tie that in, because Jackson's love for Salma Hayek's character, who is his wife, who's in another prison, is such a driving force for his character that I don't mind too much, near as much as I would in a movie that didn't set this up. When this ties into how invested he gets in Reynolds' love life, how this is a character that's actually driven by love, so it's almost not out of place. So going off of that, then it kind of turns into the Adam Sandler Damon Wayans movie Bulletproof, pretty much from then on, where it's two dudes who hate each other and have a bit of a vendetta, basically getting chased by people where one's trying to transfer the other somewhere else. And the thing about this is that I didn't really pick this up on the plot going in, but I did kind of like the connection they had, where it made sense that they did know each other going in, because one of them is a bodyguard and one of them is a hitman, so they've crossed paths before, obviously. And I like that actually added... I kind of like that their characters had that history, so we didn't have to go on the whole... them getting to know each other and getting used to each other thing we typically see in pairings like this in movies. So it was nice that they found a way to cut out all that bullshit. But even so, I talked about how it's, when the movie is doing what you would imagine it would be its key force as far as finding laughs, would be the fact that you have Ryan Reynolds and Samuel Jackson in the same movie. Only trouble is that Ryan Reynolds is at his most funny in this movie when he's not trying to be funny. So obviously there's going to be some problems here to where the movie setup might not be as perfect as it sounds. And the thing here is, this is one of those movies that you can tell, it's a flat-out it's an action comedy for sure, but it's still a flat-out comedy. It's violent as fuck, but it's still a comedy. And it is pretty much trying to be funny almost all the time, even in its action scenes, as big as the action scenes are. But it's one of those movies that, despite all this and despite its setup, there's not, like, big laughs in it. Like, it's one of those movies that you watch and you can say, like, that's funny in your head, but it doesn't really, you know, force a laugh out of you, maybe, like, a few times. I think the one scene that probably got the biggest laugh from me was the whole Reynolds complaining to a stranger about what Jackson's gotten him into as the action scene's happening behind him, which leads to a giant... The action scenes in this movie are very long, too, like the movie itself is. But, yeah, that's the thing, is it's really missing, for being such a big comedy, it's really missing those big laughs. Like, they're not in here. So I don't know if this might be a movie that benefits a lot more from seeing with a crowd, I guess. But just on its own merits, without that kind of leverage, the laughs really don't come that big. And for a movie like this, that seems to be what it was really going for. And for it to really fall short there is like, it's something you notice for sure. And there's a lot of like very old jokes in it, like very overused jokes. Like there's the whole one in particular that stands out is hitching a ride from The Nuns. which can be funny in context, and yeah, Reynolds has to go fuck yourself just as he realizes it's nuns. But, you know, it's like, there's Ready to Rumble, there's Beavis and Butthead Do America. The whole hitching a ride with nuns joke, the most unlikely people hitching a ride with nuns joke has been done many, many times before, and this one really adds nothing new to it. It even has Jackson singing like David Arquette did in Ready to Rumble. It's just an old-ass joke. And they even end up doing a joke that's, it's funny in this, but obviously we have a big standard here, and that is, it's kind of like they tried to get Jackson to redo the Aim for the Bushes scene from The Other Guys. And that's, like I said, it's still kind of funny in this, but it just kind of feels like a retread like most of the jokes do, and that's really where it comes up short. And then we've got stuff like the Selma Hayek character, who's supposed to be like this really bad, talking about another character. It almost feels like this is like a follow-up to her character in Savages, like after Travolta arrested her. And she's supposed to be like this, you know, complete off-the-wall psychopath, constantly yelling profanity, in control of everything. And it doesn't really work. It didn't really work for her in Savages either. I don't think this is really the kind of part she should seek out, because it's it feels very forced coming from her, especially the use of profanity, which of course is not typically a problem. Like I said, you can make it very funny if it's used right, like the way Jackson used it, for instance. But even then, it feels like Jackson's use of motherfucker is much more going along with, say, an internet meme than, say, a part that fits Jackson. So it's like what was I talking about recently, where it was like, you probably should, it was the Hot Aunt May thing from Spider-Man. It was like, try not to let the internet write movies, because that's not gonna work. They will not translate well, I promise. So with all those, and even Reynolds even says in the movie later, it's like, this dude has ruined the word motherfucker for me. I can't do it anymore. And yeah, Hayek is the same way, where it's like, it just feels really played out like it's supposed to make her character some badass, or make whatever she says supposed to be funnier, but it doesn't work that way, and it just makes it really redundant too. And the way they kind of play on the, well, I did like the whole flashback scene where they introduced how they met. I did like that. It's weird how gratuitous they are, how much the flashback scenes actually kind of work in this movie. Well, they're not completely gratuitous, but they keep feeling like they're out of place in the movie whenever they just randomly pop up. But the thing here is that they also did that joke to try to show how in command she is by doing the whole, the woman in the corner thing, which was really not funny the first time. It's even more embarrassing that they doubled down on it and tried again. So, yeah, it's like, you would think for a comedy this big, the laughs would be non-stop, or at least, you know, almost there, but it feels actually quite distant from this. Like, it doesn't even feel like it's almost gonna reach the status that it had the potential for. It feels very much like they were pretty far off the target the whole time, but the movie doesn't come off bad. It just feels like it just kind of goes through its own motions, but doesn't really, like, thinking it's reaching those peaks, when really, if it were to stand back and look at itself, it would realize, oh, I guess we're not. So I guess that's on the people that made it, because they were standing back and watching playback and all that, but it really just wasn't working as a big comedy. As an action movie, the action scenes aren't that bad. They're not, like, flawlessly put together by any means, but, like, physically there, but, like, the editing is pretty nicely done. The editor is Jake Roberts, who was just nominated for Hell or High Water. So yeah, the action scenes are much better done than the comedies. And like I said, the action scenes are, like, long and really big, too. And like I said, while it still feels like they weren't made by an action director at all, they suit the movie well enough and get us from point A to point B. It's usually really disgustingly apparent when, like, a comedy guy is trying to do an action scene and it just doesn't work at all, but they work well enough in the context, so better than movies like Collide or some shit, at least. And there are some scenes that kind of stick out, surprisingly, like Jackson's flashback about the murdered preacher. is this really artfully done scene. It's almost kind of like one of the scenes in, like one of the scenes within a scene in Seven Psychopaths, only like more artfully done. And it's like, it's so well done that it just really sticks out in a weird way. Like, it really feels like it should be somebody else's backstory in another movie or something. And a much more serious movie at that. And talking about how it looks, while there is some surprising stuff like that, there's also stuff like, this happens in a few scenes, and one of the action scenes too, unfortunately, and that is, this movie has this weird problem where it's almost like some scenes are too bright, and like everything on the surface is too reflective, and it makes the picture look blurry. That was weird. That was weird that they did. I suppose by the time they noticed that, it was too late to go back and reshoot it. So that looked a little off. So yeah, despite how big it feels as both a comedy and an action movie, the action succeeds more than the comedy does, but it still feels very... It still feels like not a very experienced person was behind the camera when you're watching it. And like I said, you're waiting for those really big laughs, and they just don't come. Like, you might get some mild chuckles, but that's about it. Even, like, the biggest laughs in the movie are still just, you know, yeah. But, yeah, Logan Lucky, just last week, a Soderbergh movie, has significantly bigger laughs in it, and kind of a similar hectic vibe where the laughs come from. Like I said, to the point that I was laughing all the way home at stuff that was in Logan Lucky. Here, no, not really. Like I said, that Reynolds thing I was talking about with the action scene in the background, I mentioned that really because it's one of the only laughs I really remember. And I just got back. The movie probably ended a little less than an hour ago. So, I don't know. It just feels like a lot of missed opportunities here, but... It could have been a lot worse. It could have been just, you know, everything was horribly done, but we have that action that kind of stands out in the type of comedy that it is. And the two leads don't completely fall flat. It's just... Yeah, it's just... They're there, but they're not there enough. Near enough. So, yeah, there you go. Our next movie is going to be Birth of the Dragon, which is this movie that is apparently... I heard about it a while back, and then I didn't hear anything until it was suddenly at our theater. And I knew it was going to be this whole Bruce Lee, and then he fought this master because the guy thought that... The guy didn't like that he was teaching, you know, martial arts to Westerners. Westerners, in this case, you know... in essence, white people. And this movie, it says in they give us this whole story in the captions at the beginning, and then it says, this movie was inspired by this fight. And it's like, okay, that's... You're gonna just use this as vague as possible, aren't you? I can already tell by the way you worded that. And I had to think back, but I remember the thing that I heard, and it was definitely occurring to me as the movie went on, the reason I had heard about this movie a while back was because it was controversial in its setup. Not only were they going to use like this famous real-life fight as this inspiration for this pretty much 99.999% fiction movie, it was the idea that, obviously, with stuff like Ghost in the Shell coming out this year, people are all about this putting an end to whitewashing in movies thing. Well, while this isn't... Oh, yeah, it's not whitewashing in that sense, but in the way that you have a movie about Bruce Lee and this guy, Wong Jack Man, and the fact that they're going to fight, and that's what the center of this movie is, that's what this is about. But for some reason, the guys that wrote this didn't think that was enough. They had to add on just a little more. So we take this American character. I don't remember the actor's name. I don't remember the character's name, so he's just going to be the American throughout this review. We put the American right in the middle of this movie, and we just pretty much put all of our focus on it. It's like the whole fight thing, and the whole fact that somebody's playing Bruce Lee in this movie is all background after a while. And it's all about this American guy and his love life. And the fact that he wants to be trained. And that he's getting mixed signals from the two people he wants to learn from. So that's what the movie is. Like, that's the start. This is just a weird movie. It's weird that this movie exists. It's weird that I saw it in theaters while we're at it. And the first thing I'd like to point out is the portrayal of Bruce Lee here. Now, some people might see this as a good thing, and when I say people, I mean the people that get really mad when you see, like, biopics or movies that have real people in them, and it's like these movies exist just to glamorize them and make them look saintly and flawless and all that. Well, I don't know. I don't know for sure. I'm very familiar with his movies, but I'm not that familiar with Bruce Lee, whoever he was as a person prior to his death and in his youth. So I don't know the accuracy. Looking at the rest of the movie, I'm going to assume it's totally inaccurate, but I don't know for sure. But I would have researched this. If I would have thought I was going to have to think about this, and that is the fact that the way they portray Bruce Lee, I don't know how he was in real life, but this movie basically portrays him as like a big giant Hollywood dick. And this was like a decade before he was even Hollywood. This is when he's like way in his early days. He's talking about getting an offer for the Green Hornet and stuff like that. But before that, we get like he's always walking around in his sunglasses, and they're shooting this movie by themselves with his other dudes, and a dude is trying to get in the shot while also trying to make the fall. And when he explains this, Bruce Lee's just like, "Well, it's not about you, dipshit. It's about me." That's his actual line. Even the dipshit, he says that. And it's like, oh, alright. So the thing here is, and he's like a self-proclaimed living legend. Like, he actually says, you know, like, why do you need to meet living legends when there's one right here? He actually says stuff like that. And he just has this arrogance about him throughout. And so you look back and you realize that WWE made this movie. And you're like, so everybody went into the trouble of making this movie. And you're like, okay, so how are they trying to portray him? Because you think there's a movie called Birth of the Dragon, and it's going to be about Bruce Lee and how he came to be and all that stuff. So it's like, generally you think they probably want to portray him in a likable way. So the way they portray him, it's probably going to be so that we can like him. And you're watching this, and immediately that's confusing. So it's like, okay, are they taking the complete opposite approach? Is it supposed to be Wong Jack Man that's supposed to be the good guy in the center? Because by the end of the movie, when we actually get to the fight, Bruce Lee feels like a villain. So I don't know, and that's before it even goes into the other thing following the fight, but we may or may not get there. I don't know. So it was just really confusing of the fact that he was this much of a dick, but I still wasn't sure how we were supposed to take him, if we were supposed to see him as a good guy or a bad guy. That's where the problem lies, is the fact that I wasn't really sure. I just knew he was definitely being portrayed as a dick, but I didn't know for sure if we were supposed to see him as an antagonist or not. So it's like, it doesn't even matter in this sense, in the context of this movie, about, you know, if they portrayed Bruce Lee accurately or not. The question is, are they trying to make us like him even if they show off arrogance? I have no idea. I know I didn't care for him, but if that's what they were going for, okay. But then why the fuck are we supposed to care by the time we get to the last 10 minutes of the movie and we see the birth of what Bruce Lee was to become, and, you know, what he supposedly learned and all that? I don't know. We were so focused on this fucking American kid. I don't know. We weren't paying enough attention. There's even a moment at the end fight when there's like, it's kind of like a camera trick to show off like the fight was almost supernatural or something. But even so, what's going on is we've been building up to this fight. We know that's what the whole movie's based on. We know that's the point we've been getting to. And so we're watching this fight, and then there's actually a moment in the fight where the camera just completely turns around and does a 180 and just focuses on the American kid's reactions. It's like, the fight is not even on screen anymore, we're just looking at this kid. And that's kind of the essence of the whole movie in one shot. It's like, oh, you want this, do you? You want this? Well, we're gonna turn the camera around and give you this and leave that back there. That's like the whole feel of the movie. So yeah, what we actually have in the foreground here is him falling in love with this girl who is the niece or something of this big crime boss lady. And he gets in trouble because she's not supposed to go out or, you know, mingle or whatever the fuck. And he's out there taking her out to play baseball and shit. I don't know. I really don't know. But then, obviously, we do have fight scenes in here. There's one scene towards the beginning where they throw fucking bookies into this. And that's just for a side character. That's not even the main characters at all. But the bookies characters leads to this fight that looks a lot like the fight outside the bar in Jack Reacher. The Remember You Wanted This scene. It basically plays up exactly like that. And I did notice that for a movie like this, like for a very low rent, you know, trying to be martial arts movie type movie, that really probably should have been straight to video. It looks so weird seeing this on a theater screen. This is anything but theatrical or cinematic or anything. So while I did feel like praising the fact that they didn't heavily edit it like most poor movies of this nature would do, it still kind of had this blandness to it, because it's like they show the fight and the camera has to pan up for a second and then it pans back down and then that's it. That's the end of the fight. And so if you want to take it that way, I don't know. But there are some things that are surprisingly well done. Like, the movie's obviously set in the 60s. The production design isn't too bad, with the layout, and then you've got the cars. The cars are one of those cases where it's like, wow, those cars are ridiculously clean, almost as if they're on loan to from somewhere else to this production, and they're going to be taken right back in their pristine order. But other than that, it looked fine. The costume design is fine, I guess. Not particularly creative, but sets the tone as much as it needs to within the context, I guess. With how much the context of the fact that it's the 60s matters in this movie. And they did show some stuff, well, when it comes to fight scenes. Like, the end fight, when it's not focusing on that kid, is showing us. I did like a particular moment when there's, like, a moment that goes in slow-mo where he has to use every limb one right after the other to block shots. And the way the camera kind of flows and showing each of these motions happen, that's kind of a nice shot and really shows off that they care what the fight scenes look like, and that there was actually a point to build up to this fight scene. But, talking about the fight scene, the one we've been building to, there's something else we should probably mention, and that is how we get to this fight scene. Because obviously Bruce Lee wants to fight at first, but of course the guy's too noble. He's like, no, I need a reason to fight this. No, I won't just fight you willy-nilly now. So, they need a reason. He needs a reason to fight Bruce Lee, so here's what happens. Crime boss lady has American Kid's love interest away. Like, she can't come out, because that's what she does. Like, she threatens her with putting her in prostitution if she doesn't straighten out, or whatever. So she goes, and she's like, okay, fine. If they're gonna fight, I'll let these girls go if Bruce Lee wins. It's like, okay, you gotta fight now. And he's like, okay, I have purpose now. Now I will fight Bruce Lee. And it's like, hold on. What the fuck connection does this woman have to this fight? What is her investment in this? It doesn't matter. Because the whole thing just exists to set this fight off. And they had to connect the two, they had to connect the bullshit plot they made up with this whole love story and this kid's wanting to save this girl like he's fucking Travis Bickle or something. Just making other people fight instead of doing the fighting for himself. Which comes through even more in that last 10 minutes. The finale of this movie is so... oh, Jesus. To where it almost tries to become like a comedy. Almost in like the Shanghai movie sense, only just imagine them much worse. And so, yes, they just have this really senseless reason to get to the fight to begin with, and it's like, how contrived do you have to be if your whole purpose was to show this fight, and to kind of show a bit of behind the scenes about this fight. But no, you decide that either you don't have enough material, or you're not talented enough to build on the material. So you just make your own shit up and throw it in, even if it's totally and completely unrelated, and you're like, oh shit, we have to make this stuff connect, how do we do that? This person, completely unrelated, is suddenly totally invested in this, because we need this to connect to this. and we need this dude to have a reason to do this. And it's, I mean, good God, how sloppily put together has a movie been? And then that's the thing, too, is it's like they put so much focus on the fight at the start, and we know that's the main setup, but then they also put so much focus on this kid and his love story, and it's like, which one of these stories is even the detour? Because one of these stories is the main focus, the other is not. But which one is which? We don't know. So, yes, they did not blend together as much as it might have sounded like before you put it on paper, but... And you maybe should have noticed that and gone through some rewrites on the other, but no. They just wanted to move right through this. For some reason, we needed this movie. They couldn't put any more thought into it. This movie had to get out in theaters as fast as possible. Because we really, really needed this. I don't know. So yes, it's basically trying to build up that it's this big martial arts movie that's going to build up this big fight, but it also on the side is trying to be action, crime, romance all in one. With this kid that can't even fight. And he doesn't even learn anything. He doesn't even learn to fight. He hits a dude with a bottle and then lays down while everybody else fights. It's supposed to be funny. I just think it's a fucking waste of time. Okay, but despite all of that, the weird thing about this movie is even though it's that contrived, it's that lazy, it's that stupid, it's not a movie that makes me mad. I wasn't... Like, it's not to the point to where I can even call it, like, a... It's probably a bad movie, but bad movies are movies that I struggle to get through. I think this movie was just so bafflingly off that I was just taken by it. Not in a way that I could say, whoa, this was, like, prime entertainment, believe it or not. No, it's not, like, I don't think it's something I'd watch again. That would just be a total waste of time, but... I wasn't really pissed off and mad at it, despite how just fucking moronic it was. So it's just, I just let it go, and that it's short helps. So it just kind of does its thing, I guess. It does feel dragged on when we out on that last stupid 10 minutes where they like fight in the club and shit or whatever that was. But... yeah, they try to throw in little, I guess, little references or things in there. There's a dude that's got, like, they're basically like brass knuckles, except they're spikes. And so he goes, and Bruce Lee ends up getting punched right here, and he's got 5 things on there, but they only leave the 3 because of the bear claws and her the dragon and stuff like that. So it's like, hey, this. I don't know where the fuck this movie was going in that last 15 minutes, or for that matter at all, but I didn't just completely hate it. Like, it wasn't making me miserable. It kept the attention, I guess, most of the time. Even if it was just totally and completely fucking senseless, and there's no reason for it to exist. So, yeah, that's really all I can say about it. That's what it is. The end. We're going to go into DVD land now. Our next movie is going to be Everything, Everything. This is a movie that I saw like one thing go by for, and I saw like one thing online, but I had no idea what it was. I didn't really get a very good glimpse of it, because I tend to try to avoid that stuff. But from what I saw, it looked like an indie movie, just like an indie romance movie or something, kind of like what The Big Sick ended up being. But that's not really what Everything is, I came to learn very quickly. This was one of those young adult romance books that they've made into a movie. And really, really damn fast. And so, they're going to try to do... They basically... Obviously, the setup is the girl in the plastic bubble. It's the John Travolta movie, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. The same thing. It's a girl now. And her mom, Anika Noni Rose, is basically keeping her captive and saying, no, if you leave the whole house is the bubble, I guess. And if she leaves, she might die. So she's basically held prisoner, because her mom wants to keep her safe and is all paranoid and stuff. But naturally, she falls in love with the boy next door. Our cast here is Rue from The Hunger Games and the older kid from Jurassic World. So... obviously, it's going to begin the way pretty much all these young adult books start. The whole the girl narrates in that tone and, like, the inflections to let us know that she's so relatable to her audience no matter what kind of circumstances she's found herself in, where she's telling us about her sickness and she's like, sorry to be so morose. It's like, yeah, I was just thinking the other day about how much I hear teen girls walking around saying the word morose. But okay. And she gives us a little Jurassic Park illustration explanation of what her deal is. What's wrong with her blood cells or whatever the fuck. And then she's like, at least I have the internet. And she's watching cat videos on the internet. Because that's relevant, because this is 2008, apparently. So, obviously, as I said, she falls for the boy next door, and the boy has to figure out how to get in, or get her out, but it's like a forbidden love. That's right, we've got the sick girl cliche, and we've got the forbidden love cliche in the same damn movie. Nice. If you didn't have enough Walk to Remembers in your life, or enough The Fault in Our Stars is in your life, well, now you got this bullshit to go with it. And I'm sure the adult crowd just ate it right up and went totally and completely crazy. I could just tell by looking at it. And the thing about it is it still tries to feel like one of those bullshit, quirky indie movies. Take, for instance, The Astronaut, where we do get these moments that are kind of nice and kind of a good idea, to where she imagines them having these meetings. It gets way out of hand by the time they're in fucking space, and then it just really beating you over the head. It's like, look, she's floating away. They're getting more distant in their relationship. Fuck you. So she imagines, she's built this little thing, this little diner or whatever, because that's just what she does. It's a hobby. She's got an astronaut in there. I don't know. So the astronaut is actually there when she fantasizes that they're there, and it's like, wow, you're trying to do the young adult thing and the quirky indie movie bullshit. Like, Zach Braff would not think of this shit. He would turn it away. And it's but we have to go on this. And this is the thing, is we have these completely uninteresting characters. This girl is the whole, I'm trying so hard to be relatable because I watch cat videos and shit. And we got this guy who's like, oh, I'm sympathetic because I've got a mean dad that pushes bunk cakes out of my hand. So, we go on, and it's like, not only are they completely uninteresting, but they have their first talk, and obviously whenever they're texting or whatever, we see it's like they're face-to-face in her mind. So they're talking, and then she's like, so, I can't leave the house, and he's like, why? And she's like, oh, look, the stars, and it's like, oh, look, the weather, just anything she can think of to not talk about why she can't leave the house. And it's like, are we really gonna dance around this bullshit so that you can... There's going to be some mistake later, and it's like, oh, you didn't tell me you were sick. Oh my god, I almost killed you. This is horrible. And it's like, oh, but this is how I show my love. And it's like, we don't even do that. They dance around it for the first scene they talk about it, where it's not even mentioned. The scene ends before she explains, oh, by the way, I'm totally sick, can't leave the house or I'll die. The next scene, he just fucking knows. He was told off screen by another person. And we're not even sure how this person knows, so it's like... So she's friends with the maid's daughter, and so it's like the maid's daughter knows, and then the maid's daughter relays the fact to the maid that she's in love with the boy next door, and so the maid goes to the kid next door and tells her, or tells him, and then all this happens off screen apparently. If this is what happened, I don't know. Just 1 second he doesn't know, then the next he just does. Okay, we'll just assume a whole bunch of shit happened off screen so that we can move on. Maybe this movie will end quicker. So, we go on that, and there's also, talking about that, there's also the whole nurse subplot, where it's like kind of like the last 20 minutes of Mrs. Doubtfire is a whole subplot by itself. It'll be really great. She fires her. And so it's like, I was thinking about Todd Solondz's movie Storytelling, and it was like, that would be a great way for this movie to finish, if the maid being fired was the same thing. Sadly, that is not the case, and we have to go on. Look it up on Wikipedia if you don't know what storytelling is. You'll see that this would have been such a better ending to this movie. So it goes on... And this is a sickness that apparently waits for all the plot points. Like, it waits to kick in for very major plot points. So, and there, until it takes effect, and waits for things to unfold so it can be really super dramatic when it finally happens. But then that's kind of explained later, but then again, not so much. Because you look at this and you think, why is the sickness only kick in here, or only kick in there? And then they try to make this big twist happen. But then it's like, when you look back, and you're like, okay, now I'm just more confused. That didn't make sense of anything, it just made it even more fucking messed up. So there's that. And then we have the back and forth here between how this kid feels. Her little boyfriend. Where it's like, she basically says, you know, she's trying to explain, I just need to get out of here. I need to be with you. I don't care what happens, because when I'm stuck in here, I'm alive, but I'm not living. It's that stale bullshit. But then finally it gets to a point where she's like, you know, hey, you know, I don't think when I'm around you. It's dangerous. I need you to go away because I could die. Because when I'm around you, I just drop my guard and I just do whatever I want. And he defends this by saying, thinking is overrated. That's what he says. Thinking is overrated. So, that's alright. Just jeopardize your health for me. I don't care. That's, as long as we get to fuck, I don't care how unhealthy you are. Well, then later she leaves the house. And what's his response? What are you trying to do? Kill yourself? I think this guy's a little confused. This is what goes on the whole movie. It's back and forth like this. But we're supposed to find it romantic. I don't really find anything romantic in this. And that mainly has to do with the fact that the high points of this movie should be the dialogue and the back and forth between these characters and their chemistry. Well, there's one problem. There's no fucking chemistry here. Not even a little bit. And there's no spark, there's nothing. It's just these characters are boring when they're separated, these characters are boring when they're together, and there's just nothing to feel throughout this whole movie, no matter what. And it's just all this reused cliche bullshit over and over and over again, and not effective in even one scene I can think of. Not one scene kind of breaks through and says, oh, I just touched your heart a little bit. Nothing. It's just nothing. I feel nothing for this movie. I feel nothing towards characters. Nothing at all. So that's what that is. But like I said, though, I am sure the crowd it was made for, I'm sure they love it, and good for them. But I will never, ever, ever be one of those people. Our next movie is going to be a movie called Blind, a movie I didn't know existed until it was in Redbox, but I saw Alec Baldwin, so I was like, okay, I will check that out. It's Alec Baldwin, Demi Moore, and Dylan McDermott. And when this movie starts, Alec Baldwin is our main character, and he is a blind writer who was blinded in a car accident with his wife, and now, because he teaches writing, he has to have his students' work read to him. So he hires people to do this, but of course he's basically trying to be House. He's very, you know, irritable, he doesn't like people, and people have to basically help him out all the time because of a disability or whatever. And that's the way it goes, and eventually, obviously, he will fall in love. But when the movie starts, you would think this movie is about Dylan McDermott's character. Because it basically plays him up like he's the main character, and we follow him and what he does, and his ins and outs, and all that stuff. And we get this big introduction, and then just bam, he's in prison. And it turns out he's not the main character. He's rarely a driving force when we get to the outskirts of the movie, but to go into what the actual plot, go into the actual story here, we are actually, this is another case. I just talked about this with fucking The Hitman's Bodyguard. We get 2 intros to Baldwin. We only need 1, but we get 2 that are more or less the same scene. Because we start off, and the first thing he does is interview this kid named Gavin O'Connor, which might be odd if you're aware of the director named Gavin O'Connor who did, like, Warrior, Pride and Glory, The Accountant, Jane Got a Gun. Yeah, there's a character named Gavin O'Connor in this movie. And he's interviewed, and it's like Baldwin does his thing, he does his I'm hardened because I'm blind, but don't patronize me, and oh, I'm just gonna keep outsmarting you, make it seem like I'm impossible to deal with. And then Gavin's intrigued, and he's like, well, okay, I still want the job. Great. Wonderful. So then when Dylan McDermott is arrested, Demi Moore is wrapped up in this as well, so she has to serve community service. And what's she do for community service? When you know it, it's to read to Alec Baldwin. So that scene we just had with Gavin, we get to have all over again with Demi Moore. Which would make sense. Obviously, you only need this scene once, and I would say use it to introduce Demi Moore's character, because, number one, she's kind of the other main character in this. And secondly, it's like, she actually has something to branch off of. Like, Gavin does have a purpose in this story as it goes on, but there's nothing that really he branches from to get to this point. Demi Moore's character we gotta watch start here with Dylan McDermott and then go through this and go through this, and she's got all this other stuff going on, and then she eventually gets to this point. So it would make sense if she got the whole intro where we watched it lead up to this. This Gavin kid just kind of comes and goes when the script pleases. And when he finally does come back, it's kind of like the, oh yeah, I forgot you were there, Gavin, sorry about that. And his story is only mildly important. Like, it's a crucial turn, I suppose, for Baldwin's character, but in the big picture here, it kind of feels like so much of an afterthought. That it just seems like there's a whole lot of stuff we don't need when this movie is starting. But apart from that, there's a lot to like in this movie, for sure. Demi Moore is an actress that I like occasionally in stuff like G.I. Jane. But a lot of time I do find her to be... I often watch her in movies thinking, could you have maybe gotten somebody else? Like, just somebody with a little more, flair in them or something. Because she always... For a lot of the time now, she seems like kind of a dead zone. I loved her in About Last Night as well, but lately it's just like... There's just hardly anybody back there. She had some personality in Mr. Brooks, but even in Mr. Brooks, I keep thinking, there had to have been another actress. There had to have been somebody more qualified for this. But there is enough between them to sustain the movie, and a lot of that strength comes from Baldwin, who's very good in this. And Baldwin's one of those cases that's interesting, because if this part were to be explained to me, like what the character is... He's probably not somebody I ever would have thought of for this part, but he really fits and really does a great job with it, and really finds, just those right moments, and just those moments when to make him an asshole and when to make him likable, and when there's kind of an in-between where he's a little bit of both, but leaning more on the likable side. He's obviously got a tragic backstory to go with him. There are those... It's a huge cliche I'm really sick of now. It's that moment where we already know that somebody's backstory involves a car accident. Like, look at, Hesher, Baby Driver, Perks of Being a Wallflower. It's always the same thing where we get that... We already know what the flashback is. We know it's going to end up somebody beloved to the main character dies in a car accident. But the way they play this up, every single time, in every single movie, good or bad... We have to see the build-up to this car wreck and the ultimate crash itself in pieces throughout the movie. Like, we're putting the pieces together and building it, but it's like, we fucking know it was a car accident. We know. Why are we being seen that? Why is it being teased to us throughout the movie as if it's going to be some big reveal when it happens? There is a tiny bit of a reveal, more so in this than other movies, that the flashback was hiding from us that's important to Baldwin's character, but... Still, it feels like an awful lot of build-up for something we knew was coming, and it's like, are you just wanting the jump moment where it's like the crash happens? Because it's like, that's every damn movie with a car crash in someone's past, ever. But okay. And then, yeah, it takes that turn where, obviously, Demi Moore and Alec Baldwin are going to fall in love. Which is something I... Honestly, since I knew nothing about the movie going in, it's not really a direction I was kind of anticipating it go. But I don't necessarily mean that in a, whoa, it caught me off guard, that was surprising kind of way. It was kind of like I don't know, they try to start it off with this scene that's trying to be a bit steamy, where it's really hot in the room, but he can't open the windows because of the noise. It distracts him from everything else, because his ears are really all he's using in this particular moment. So he has to keep all the windows closed, and she's getting hot, so she's like, well, he can't see me, I'll just take my shirt off. And it's supposed to be like this really kind of, building erotic kind of thing, this building sexual tension thing. because he can sense when she's done that by her aroma or whatever. I don't know. It's a little silly, sure. But when that happens, at the time in the movie that it does, it kind of comes from out of nowhere. Where it's like, oh, this is suddenly an almost erotic thing now. Didn't see that coming. And then they try to play off the scene in the very next moment with like a comedic little thing when she walks out of the room all frustrated. But it's like, that just feels even more out of place than the removing of your shirt did. And it gets a little jumbled there at times, but for the most part, the movie kind of works. And it's really the basis of how their characters interact, and especially Baldwin's character itself and his performance. He really carries it. And his whole... I like the Gavin kid, too, and the way they kind of... how, like I said, his story is not very crucial, but it was an aspect of the movie I did like overall, even if it just kind of popped up whenever it wanted to. There is some on-the-nose dialogue. There is, when Dylan McDermott hears about this potential affair, his response is, he's a short story, I'm your novel. And it's like, that's pretty on the nose, and that's pretty cheesy, but yeah, it's fine. And there is that stuff. Obviously, eventually we get to the point to where the more out of control this potential affair is going to get, the more we realize Dylan McDermott's probably getting out of prison, and then we're going to have our third act. And the thing is that when this is set up, we bring a darker element to the movie. We bring murder in this movie, or the possibility, the very likelihood of murder is in this movie. And then you think it's going to go in one direction, but really it starts to go in a particular direction and then just totally abandons it. Like, we build up this whole idea that Dylan McDermott's character might be really, really dangerous. He, like, goes to Baldwin's office and, like, beats him, and he's saying, you know, like, I may have possibly killed a dude to get out of prison. But then when we get to where the movie ends, it's like, we just forget that he might be dangerous. The movie just leaves him there. It's like, he's like, okay, so he's going to be running around after this ending. Okay, that's great. And then there's stuff like, well, they do handle some stuff well that you might think they won't. Like, there's stuff that feels pointless at the start, but then ultimately will have a point later. Like the guy Dylan McDermott hires at the beginning that ultimately becomes like his second-in-command, more or less, is more crucial than you think it might be on the surface. But then there's stupid stuff again, where it's like, a plot point in this movie is the idea that one person in the entire world, one woman in the history of the universe wears Chanel No. 5, and that it could be nobody else. This is a clue that gives away everything, every mystery ever, and it's like, that's, yeah, you're kind of reaching there. So, yeah, it might feel like there's a lot of stuff that could really be improved, and there's a lot of stuff that has potential that ultimately falls short, and it's like, it just kind of, this movie just kind of did whatever it wanted to do, which is not necessarily a strong thing for a movie to do, especially when it has so many different directions it wants to go. But I was fine with it. I wanted to know throughout the movie what would happen to the characters. I was constantly interested in them, which may make it more disappointing that sometimes they're just like, oh, it's this little thing, or oh, we're just going to leave that as it is. It's like, forget what you already know, just, that's fine. Just, it's fine now. But no, it's overall, I didn't mind it at all, so, but once again, though, that's mainly a credit to Baldwin's performance, so there's that. Alright, our last movie is going to be The Assignment, a complete and total shit show starring Michelle Rodriguez that's co-written and directed by Walter Hill. Yeah, that Walter Hill. The Driver, The Warriors, 48 Hours. Yeah, him. He made this movie. I don't know what you've heard about this movie, but to my understanding, it's another one that's got quite a bit of controversy behind it. Apparently, there are a number of groups that are mad at this movie, and I get that. A number of communities, various communities, are mad at this movie. I get it. I don't have to look up the reasons why. I'm sure I can figure it out after having watched it. So, what this movie is, if you hadn't heard, is, there is a hitman named Frank Kitchen. And he's this big contract killer. He's this big old hitman. He's got a beard, he's got long hair, he's got the hairy chest, and he can do his thing. There's only one weird thing about this, and that is the fact that Frank Kitchen is played by Michelle Rodriguez. Michelle Rodriguez is a man in this movie. Complete with, swear to God, full frontal shower scene, complete with fake dick. And the thing here is that you think about the fact is, you think about the concept and you're like, alright, this feels like some bullshit Luc Besson would try to pull. You look at this and you think, yeah, Michelle Rodriguez has always kind of had that reputation. She's tough, she's got the muscles, she's a fighter and all that. And it's like, yeah, well, she may have these qualities of a guy, and it's like the whole she's one of the guys thing. Only one big problem with the concept of this movie. She doesn't fucking look like a guy. And that is never more apparent than after you've seen this movie. They put like a fake nose on her, they got the fake beard, they got the fake chest hair, they got the fake dick, and it's like, it just looks like her in even a not so elaborate Halloween costume. And it's like, I've never really... Michelle Rodriguez playing a dude has never looked so feminine, because it makes everything else stand out, because it's like that shower shot, where it's like, we got everything on the front here, and it's like, they even like linger on the dick as she walks by to like really play up the fact that it's like, dude, you can make her look masculine all you want in the front, Michelle Rodriguez is still very feminine from behind. And it's like, this just looks fucking weird, and I know you're trying to use the nudity to really play it up, as if it's like, just look how real this character is, even though it's actually a woman. And it's like, no, dude, I'm not buying this for one damn second, not even close. And she's doing a voice, too. She puts on, like, kind of a deep voice or whatever. And I kind of thought they were going to do, like, what they did in Face Off. It's like, give her a voice modulator or something. But no, she has to try to keep up that manly voice through the rest of the movie, even when she is a woman and looks like Michelle Rodriguez. So, I don't know. But anyway, so what goes on here, and then, I don't even remember, Anthony LaPaglia is the villain, and he sets this up. Where he's like, he's got like this thing going on with the surgeon who is Sigourney Weaver, and this is just what it is. There's hardly a setup. It's just like Anthony LaPaglia has to get rid of him, her, whoever. So he's like, okay, I'll send him off to this doctor, and they'll make him a woman. When she wakes up a woman, she comes out ready to seek revenge, and the rest of the movie is just her killing everybody. She's a woman, and she's mad because she's a woman. And here's the thing, talking about Sigourney Weaver now. This is when the movie just kind of has the, yeah, this is a movie where Michelle Rodriguez has a dick, but that's not the big what the fuck of the movie. The big what the fuck of this movie is told from Sigourney Weaver's perspective, the surgeon's perspective, after she's in an asylum, being interviewed by Tony Shalhoub. I don't know. So, we get the whole movie from Sigourney Weaver's perspective. She doesn't have perspective on what the whole lead into this is. All she did was take Michelle Rodriguez's dick away and give her tits. Take her chest hair away, make her nose smaller. I don't know. And so it's trying to be this whole badass thing now where she's taking revenge and she's killing everybody because she's just Hitman, but oh, she's a woman now, but she's still the Hitman on the inside because that's who she really is. But we're getting this whole story from Sigourney Weaver's perspective. We're getting a whole bunch of backstories on Sigourney Weaver that mean jack shit. And a lot of these scenes are long when Tony Shalhoub is interviewing her. This character doesn't fucking matter. All that matters is she took fucking Michelle Rodriguez's dick away. That's all this character did. And she's like the main focus now because it's from her perspective. Michelle Rodriguez getting revenge on people for being turned into a woman is from the surgeon's perspective. I don't get this. I'm willing to admit that. And the weird thing is that it's still kind of from her perspective, because even though we're doing the whole Sigourney Weaver thing, there's also these intercut things of her doing like a Rodriguez doing a video confession thing. So we're kind of getting told from the perspective of that and Weaver. This movie is a complete and total fuck show. I don't know what it's even trying to do. And then it just has... The dialogue is fucking stupid, if you can believe that, after all the other shit I've mentioned. There's one scene in particular where it's like... I guess they're trying to play up that these characters are really literature-based. Like, whatever movie I was talking about recently, where it's like, all you have to do is just say authors' last names, and it makes you sound all smart and shit. And screenwriters seem to think that. So it's like there's a moment where these dudes are just talking about literature or whatever, for no reason. This is related to nothing. And then the guy's just like, oh yeah, like Poe. And then the guy's like, Poe? You mean Edgar Allan? No. I was talking about a different Poe when we were talking about literature and shit. But I think the author of this screenplay, one of which was Walter Hill apparently, seems to think that this is like, shows the characters a bit of intelligence. They have another side that's not just killing, they know literature too, because they know the first two parts of Poe's name are Edgar Allan. The stupidity in which we're dealing with, I don't even know what to, I don't know how to elaborate on that. Like, I wish I could say, here's this, and here's all the reasons this is stupid. No. Like, I just tell you what it is, and then I'm fucking speechless. I don't know how to elaborate on the fact that that's fucking stupid, because it just fucking sings for itself. Why? What the problem is here. And then they try to make it super duper flashy with, like, they just randomly have, like, the scenes randomly turn into, like, comic booky images. I don't think this is based on anything comic book-like or graphic novel-like. That's just something that's in there. I think that because they thought it would look cool or something. I don't know. The spirit's almost looking good at this point. And then the editing. Obviously, you've got these, you know, flashily edited, you know, shooting and fighting scenes or whatever, but then you have stuff like this very straight-to-video bullshit where it's like, it's two dudes walking to a car, you understand? And these are two people that she's looking for, she's gonna kill and all that, so it's very important we're watching these guys. But the thing is while we're watching them walk to their car, this takes 3 edits, but it's one of those cases where they tried to make it feel flashy, these two dudes walking to their car. So what they did was, it's one of those edits where it gets closer and closer as they walk to their car. It's in like 3 cuts, like it gets them there faster. But here's the thing, is in between those cuts, there's like a flash of white screen. So it's like the dudes are walking, flash, and then they're right here, flash, and then they're getting into their car. And it's like, this is what the editing is like. It's like, is this supposed to make 2 dudes walking to their car exciting or something? Because I think there's a dude next to me having a seizure, so you might want to help him out. So there's a lot of shit like that. Another thing that really just stands out about this movie that just makes it feel off is it feels weirdly sex-obsessed. I mean, obviously there's the whole plot, but I mean, apart from that, there's a lot of sex scenes that are really gratuitous. We get this whole delving into Weaver's sex life, once again having nothing to do with anything whatsoever. Then there's the whole scene when it's going on this movie, even though it came out first, because it's just now on DVD, there's a surprising amount of Atomic Blonde in it, which obviously is not a movie I'm fond of either, but I mean, once again, looking like a masterpiece in comparison. To where we have stuff like the interview framing device, like with Goodman and Toby Jones and Atomic Blonde. And then there's the whole idea of throwing in lesbianism for the thrills, to where it's like, obviously it's not lesbianism in the scene because Rodriguez is a guy at the time. And of course there's going to be a scene where they make out and there's a sex scene. There's a scene of Rodriguez ripping open a condom because it's like, yeah, Michelle Rodriguez is a dude, remember? I don't know, just they really, really want you to know that. But then obviously these two are still at it even when she's Michelle Rodriguez, so it's like, it just has that vibe of, that vibe I was talking about with Atomic Blonde, where it's like, let's throw lesbians in because that's like hot and shit. And it's like, dude, like, what the hell happened to you? Because this is Walter Hill. I am pretty sure this is the same Walter Hill. I mean, I didn't look into it. I just assume when I see Walter Hill's name as a writer and director on an action movie, that must be the Walter Hill. I assume this is him, but I mean, good God. If there weren't credits, I wouldn't have thought about that. Not even close. I even liked Bullet to the Head that he did with Stallone. That's like right here. And so I don't know what the hell happened with this movie. So, this is just... This movie, it feels like it was made just so you could watch it and have a story to tell. And it's a bad story. It's really, really bad. So, yeah, this was just miscalculation at its absolute worst. I don't know how the fuck this got made, but like I said, whatever's PC and what's not, if people are mad at this movie, they can be mad at it for whatever the fuck they want. Because there's nothing to like about it. So, go right ahead. Even if you haven't seen it, feel free to be mad at this movie. Please, throw all the hate at it you can. Poor Michelle Rodriguez, this must be embarrassing, but... Yep, there we go. That's it. That's all we've got. Next week, I have no idea. The only thing I know is I think I might know what the Versus is, which we're gonna go into a bit of a darker comedy aspect, and then we'll go from there. So yeah, hopefully this gets out on time. I'm running a little behind, so I'm just gonna end this here, so that's it.